for a lot of people, what they remember you and associate you very strongly with January 6th in Washington and what happened that day. And because it's still looking back on it, the most shocking thing.
For me, it was over COVID. I remember watching a Jim Acosta, one of my colleagues at CNN. He was at a Trump rally. Trump started, doing his rallies again pretty early in COVID. It was summer 2020, and Jim asked a person who was at this rally, was the person afraid that they might catch COVID at this big event? The guy wasn't wearing a mask or whatever, and the guy said something along the lines of, "Oh, COVID doesn't exist. It's a hoax." And I of course had been kind of seeing all of this stuff online from behind the computer screen. And I really wanted to kind of get out into the country in the US to really ask, well, why do you really believe that? And the first question I actually asked people was, could I see their Facebook feeds? Would they open up their Facebook feed so I could see kind of what information they were getting? Um, so yeah, I was really on the road for the kind of 5 or 6 months leading up to January 6th. And I think, you're right. I think what happened on January 6th very much was um, almost in some ways, of course, was surprising and shocking, but it's almost a natural conclusion of all of these kind of lies and conspiracy theories. I mean, if you're telling people their democracy is stolen, and the election has been rigged, etc., etc., um, what else are you kind of expecting people to do if they truly believe in this stuff, which a lot of them do?
What's your sense of what's driving a lot of this? You've seen it up front. You've spoke to these people about other things that, at that time you get a sense of where they're coming from. What's driving it?
I think, over the years, whether it's people believing stuff about elections or vaccines or QAnon or that JFK is not dead, if you really talk to people and get into it, I think a lot of it comes down to community. Everybody's looking to be part of something. Uh, and again, I think especially over COVID, we were all kind of forced into isolation, and it really exacerbated, I think, you know, the feelings of loneliness that we might already have. And I think, if people get to watch this documentary, I think it's going to be repeated on CNN International at some point, and should be on some streaming thing at some point soon. But um, you know, I think you'll see that the group that believes that JFK is alive or JFK Jr. is alive and they've left their family and they're living in Dallas, they're all actually having a great time. They're having, there is a real sense of community there. They all,
They found their tribe.
they found their tribe. Exactly. Um, and, they're having a good time. They all they're all misunderstood in some way by others in their view. And finally, they found a group that not only understands them, but also they have this piece of information. They're the only people who can see, that JFK is really alive or JFK Jr. is really alive, and nobody else gets this, nobody else gets me, but I have this. And so there is that sense of community and bond there. I would also say that, there obviously, as you know from reporting out things like this, we learned a lot of information that we couldn't put on TV, etc. But for the most part, broadly, of the people I really got to know who were into this thing or their families, a lot of folks had gone through some kind of trauma, whether it's childhood trauma or something more recent, like a divorce or things like that. So I think it's in those vulnerable moments that people kind of seek out the irrational. Um, and without getting too philosophical about it, I think, kind of back to the approach that I would like to think I have of empathy and trying to understand this is, yeah, I've spoken a little bit before about, my own mental health and things like that. And I think that, we all kind of we all like to think that we would never go off and believe in QAnon and JFK is alive, etc. But I think a lot of us have had irrational thoughts and irrational beliefs in our lives, whether it's, it can be something deeply personal if you're going through depression or an anxiety. You can believe irrational things about yourself or your loved ones, and that often time comes, in the context of a moment of angst, and a moment of you're trying to understand things and trying to. So I think for a lot of folks, it's they found themselves going through something very personally difficult, and this just happens to be the set of irrational beliefs that they are taking comfort in, and maybe taking take using as a distraction to whatever else is going on in their life.